Hello and welcome to this webinar by UKTI Recife on tenders in Brazil and how UK companies can win businesses. Today we're joined by Lucas Lacombe of LIRNEO, an international business support company based here in Recife. We've invited Lucas to speak about tenders as he's not only bid for and won tenders previously, but also aided companies through the tender process. I imagine that after this presentation there will be lots of follow-up questions, so please use the question submission system in the webinar application and we'll try to cover all the most appropriate questions at the end of the presentation. So for now I'll pass you over to Lucas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for those still in Brazil. So as Graham said, I'm the executive partner at LIRNEO, an international relation and business consultancy. I'll get a chance to talk a bit more about my company at the end, but just to give you a quick background about our experience in tendering, LIRNEO has won last year only 3 public tenders, being 2 to organize events at state and city levels, and 1 to manage the IR department, international department, of a state university here in Pernambuco. We also assisted foreign clients to enter bids in Brazil, especially prior to the 2014 World Cup. So today's presentation is aimed at giving an overview of how you, as UK companies, can enter potentially and win public tenders in Brazil. As you can see on the agenda, we'll first understand the legal framework of tenders in Brazil, the different type of bidding and its process, what is required for a foreign company to participate, and finally we'll look at some market figures and opportunity. To do business into Brazil, it is essential to grasp the size of the country and the way it works. As you can see here, Brazil is a huge place where one could fit 35 times the UK into it, or for the less Euroscepticals, it is the equivalent of Europe, including the seas. Just like the US, Brazil is a federal government, which is divided into 5 regions, 26 states, plus the federal district, and over 5,000 municipalities. In terms of public procurement, it is estimated that over 35,000 entities have to go through tenders. And to get an idea, just between January and July 2014, public procurement for goods and services represented 30.4 billion reais, which is about 6.2 billion pounds, with the pounds going up every day here. So a bit more about we're going to start with the Brazil regulations. Brazil has not ratified the World Trade Organization Agreement on Government Procurement, which gives more flexibility to bid between signatory countries. Yet the Brazilian Constitution allows foreign companies to participate in governmental bidding process. Regarding tenders, the 1988 Brazilian Constitution states that the Union, or the federal government, has exclusive power to legislate for all types of public tenders and contracts, in all their forms for direct and indirect public administration, public and mixed capital companies. There must be equal conditions to bidders in public process, except specific cases. And direct exploration of an economic activity by the states must only be permitted when necessary for the imperative of national security or a relevant collective interest, unless stated by the Constitution. The government is responsible for providing public utility services, either directly or under a regime of concession or permission, which must always be done through public tender. Government procurement in Brazil is regulated by mainly by the law 8666, 8666, as they call it here, from 1993. As future bidders, you will most likely come across it. This law establishes the general rules for public tenders and administrative contracts, whether it is for public works, services including publicity, transfers of ownership and leasing. Being a federal law, it applies at all governance levels and to all organs or institutions of the direct administration, special funds, public foundations, public companies, mixed capitals companies, and other entities that are directly or indirectly controlled by the union, states, federal districts, and municipalities. Besides the 8666, there also exist other laws to regulate specific sectors, which, for a matter of time, we won't have time to tackle here today. These specific regulations applies mainly for the information and communication technologies, concessions and permissions, and the energy sector, and including oil and gas. Public tender was designed to ensure compliance with some basic constitutional principles, such as legality, morality, equality, administrative probity, etc. Therefore, the law 8666 is quite strict on public agents who must ensure the competitiveness of the tender and cannot interfere in any way in favor of one bidder. There cannot be any preference or distinction irrelevant to the object of the contract, such as place of the headquarters, for example, as well as any differential treatment for commercial, legal, labor, social security, or any other nature between Brazilian and foreign companies, even when it is financed by international agencies. However, it is not that clear when we have a closer look at it. Both the Brazilian Constitution and the law 8666 let us understand that there tend to be a preferential treatment to small Brazilian companies and to domestic market, which is considered as a national patrimony. And in case of a tie in a tender, the law clearly states that preference will be given in this respective order. Goods and services produced or rendered by Brazilian companies, goods and services produced in the country, and investment in research and technology in Brazil. So this obviously kind of brings a doubt to all of you whether it's worth going or not, but we'll see. That is interesting. We'll now look at the bidding modes, the different modes that we have here in Brazil. So there are different modes of tenders in Brazil, each with a specific aim. The first three we have here are defined according to the estimated value of the future contract, which is different whether it's goods and services on one side or infrastructure. The first one we have here is the bidding mode. Is the most used for tenders. The mode used for tenders above 650,000 reais for goods and services, and 1.5 million for infrastructure. Yet the law permits to use bidding for any value in case of purchase of real estate goods, private-public partnership, or international tenders. Any bidder can participate as long as he or she fulfills the requirement, and there's no need to be previously registered, which is the case in other modes. In the case of pricing, this applies for tender up to 650,000 in goods and services, or 1.5 million for infrastructures. The bidders must be registered at the entity which is organizing the bid and tender at least 3 days before the bid takes place. In the mode invitation for tender up to 80,000 reais in goods and services, or 150,000 reais for infrastructure, the administration will invite at least 3 bidders from that area, for that sector, and independently if they are registered or not. Contests and auctions, there are specific kind of tender in Brazil, a bit like the entry exam to be a civil servant, and sales auctions that we have in the UK. But for the purpose of this presentation, we'll skip those today, but it's interesting for you to have them in mind as a bidding mode. The last one we have here on the slide is trading, which is the newest and the most used bidding mode in Brazil. You can actually substitute any of the first three modes, bidding, pricing, and invitation, for the purchase of common goods and services. The dispute occurs in public session, either in person or online, and in reverse order. We first have the proposal and the bids, and then we have the verification of the documents of the winner. Trading is in fact a reverse auction, as the criteria is most of the time based on lowest price. Being more transparent, faster, and enhancing competition, the trading mode accounts for about 67% of tenders in Brazil, and have saved billions of reais to the public administration up until now. The bidding process in Brazil is usually the same steps as for all the bidding modes. Public tender, first step will be the tender notice publication, or the request for proposal, with different timing, as you can see here, according to the bidding modes. Bidding being from 30 to 45 days, pricing 15 to 30 days, invitation 5 working days, and trading 8 working days. Then we go to participate in tender. The company will have to prove that it is legally acting in Brazil, and it has a good good health in general. So it is usually required a series of documents to show your health. I'll come back to that in a moment. Then there will be the third phase, which is the submission of the price proposal, followed or not by a bidding phase, as we've just seen on the slide before. I just want to come back on the documentation required, because I think that will be very interesting for you. So to participate in tenders, the company will have to present a series of documents to show, first, the legal authorization to act in Brazil. So that's come with the ID, the company statutes, the registration certificates. You also have to work through to show its economic and financial qualifications. So the accounting balance, non-bankruptcy certificates, and have a minimum fund sometimes for certain bids. Tax compliance, you have to have your registration number, the taxpayer number, making sure you pay your social security and your no labor issues, and tax regularity at federal, state, and municipality levels. And not in all bids, but sometimes it is required to show your technical skills, such as professional credentials in a certain sector, especially infrastructure, qualification certificates that you get from other projects or tenders you previously did, and staff qualification sometimes. So this is the 4 main areas that you have to show in as an applicant for the tender. So coming back to the bidding process, we have then the type of tenders, as I mentioned before. Usually the 3 main ones are lowest price, especially for the training one, as we said before, best technical skills, technical and price, it can be a mix of both, and the highest bid in case of auction, which is not what we're dealing with today. Then once declared a winner, the public administration will verify your documentation, and if it hasn't been done before, as I said, in certain modes of tenders, the documentation will be verified before, and then they will get the proposal. In trading, it is the opposite. You will first come with your proposal, the price, they declare the winner, and then you verify the documentation. There's always a time given for other bidders to appeal the decision, which is actually quite common in Brazil. They always want to go and see if the competition is legally set in Brazil, or doesn't have any issues with the request for proposal, and all the sorts. And finally, the company signs and executes the contract. So this is the usual process for bidding. Having said that, it is important to know that public procurement can be exempt of tenders in Brazil, and it's actually very common. We've got some figures at the end that can show. This exemption or ineligibility comes if the value of the tender is, the value of the goods that needs to be provided is under a certain amount, that there's no real competition because of exclusivity of the product or the service, or because of the acute specialization. And in specific cases of national interest, such as war or defense sometimes, or if you have a natural catastrophe, they can declare that they will need to go through tender to acquire some goods. So now the most important for you as future bidders is how to participate in tenders. So the law 8666 makes it very clear that in order to qualify and participate in public tendering, bidders must be legally established or represented in Brazil. So as future bidders, you may want to consider establishing your company or branch in the country, which is a whole new topic, and unfortunately I will not be able to tackle this issue here today. However, you can also consider having a legal representation in the country, and for this, the same law, says that foreign companies that operate in the country, as far as possible, will comply in international tenders with the requirements by means of equivalent documents authenticated by the respective consulate and translated by a sworn translator, and should have, this is very important, legal representation in Brazil with express power to receive service and to respond administratively or judicially. So this is the key issue here. The first part will be the documents that we saw just before, needs to be translated and authenticated for Brazilian standards. But the key issue is to have someone in the country that can represent you administratively or judicially in case you have a problem. Another option, and quite frequently used, is to create a joint venture or consortium. Okay? In this case, it is required by the law, the same law, 8666, to show the following: a proof of public or private commitment to form a joint venture signed by the participating companies, an indication of the company that will be responsible for the joint venture in Brazil, which must meet the condition of leadership as established in the public tender notice, and all the legal, economic and financial documents, the tax compliance, the technical qualification for each participating companies, the same documents that we saw before. It's important to know that the companies cannot participate individually or in another consortium for the same tender. Also very important, there is a collective responsibility that applies to all members for acts carried out in the consortium, whether it's during the tender or during the execution of the contract. And in the joint venture between Brazilian companies and foreign companies, the leadership must necessarily be exercised by the Brazilian company. So if you consider to do a joint venture, your counterpart, your Brazilian counterpart, will automatically have the leadership here in Brazil. And for the winning bidder is also obliged to promote the formation and registration of the joint venture before signing the contract. You cannot sign any contract before you actually formalize the joint venture in Brazil. You can bid without doing so, but you have to formalize it before signing the contract. You must also be aware that there's some provision that we've seen today, that we're currently seeing, that shall not apply in some cases. Here you have the law describing that these cases are in case of international tenders funded by international agencies. This applies, for example, with the UNPD, the UN Development Program, UNDP, sorry, and the World Bank. Sometimes they do have tenders here in Brazil, and they have their own rules. The Olympic Games also, and we have the World Cup. The Olympic Games also applies to this. Also, this applies for the purchase of equipment manufactured and delivered abroad by a foreign company, or the acquisition of goods and services carried out by the administrative units based abroad. So generally for the foreign ministry, foreign office, or the diplomatic service abroad. In such cases, the request for proposal must be adapted to the monetary policy and external trade norms and must comply with the relevant body's requirements. So now that we've seen a bit how to participate and the rules, we're going to have a closer look at the market. Here we have some interesting figures. All these figures are taken from the government's transparency website, so they are official figures. You can see at the bottom here the CompressNet website. And just to remind you, as mentioned earlier, between January and July 2014, the public procurement for goods and services in Brazil totalized over 6.2 billion pounds, in pounds we're talking, and went through over 98,000 processes. Okay. So on this slide here, we see that the states of Rio de Janeiro, Rio Grande do Sul, and the federal states are the three main states where the highest number of processes and the most amounts of money were spent. Here we can see that there was nearly 30 billion reais, which I was talking about. Same, those three states are the one leading. We can see all the states. São Paulo is actually only the 5th state. Bahia, and then our state, Pernambuco, is the 10th here. Here we can notice that actually the federal district, so Brasilia, accounts for about 41% of the procurement in Brazil in terms of value. On this slide here, we can see the amount of material being purchased. So it's over 17 billion reais, and we can see that is mainly right at the bottom, mainly on the services, mainly for health goods, vehicles, and IT equipment. On these slides here, so yes, sorry, all these figures I'm talking about now are between January and July 2014, the first semester of last year. There's no figures for the second semester yet, so this is where the amount is relatively low compared to other years, as we'll see in a minute. So this is why it's quite atypical in terms of numbers. So on this slide, we see the same for the purchase of services. It's just under 13 billion reais. And again, the main sectors are health, engineering, and construction services, the leading three. Here now we can see the evolutions in values, in money, of the different bidding modes since 2008. Again, for the 2014, the numbers just refer to the first semester. The interesting things here is we can see that the online trading has been going up along the years, whereas other bidding modes have been going down. We also note that exemption and ineligibility, which are here on the greenish color, are quite high, and indeed ineligibility or exemption, they represented just last year about 84% of the tenders in the last semester last year. And this last graphic also shows the public procurements per supplier size. So we can note that despite a reasonable amount of micro and small company, which have will get preferential treatment in tenders, we see that other size companies are the majority winning bids. As I said in the presentation earlier, when you have when you are a micro or small company in Brazil, you do get special treatment, especially in case of ties. To when you win a tender. So if a larger company has a final price close to yours and to the 5 or 10%, depending on the cases, you as a small company can actually win the bid. This is part of the professional treatment to small companies. So this is it for the numbers. To finish with, I wanted to show you a bit about the current opportunities in public tenders at the moment. This is what we've been noticing, the main sectors where the tenders are going at the moment. So infrastructure, obviously, is the main one. In Brazil in general, but also the northeast region where we are based, there's a huge demand for infrastructure, building airports, railways, roads, also basic infrastructure like hospitals and urban mobility as well comes into this. Pharmaceuticals, unfortunately Brazil lacks of some technology on this, so there's a lot of procurement in terms of pharmaceuticals as well for the healthcare sector. IT and renewables, energy in general, but also renewable energy. Wind and solar energy are on the high here in Brazil. They're discovering and they're actually doing all the regulations on the sectors, especially the solar sector was not very regulated in Brazil until a couple of years ago, and now it's growing. IT and software, so everything about equipment and technologies in terms of IT and communications. And last but not least, with the Olympic Games, the 2016 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, there are obviously a lot of procurement in this sector. It is good to bear in mind that some of these areas, IT, energies, are subject to specific regulations, and in the case of the Olympic Games, as we saw before, there's some provision that do not apply. So it's good to have this in mind if you want to go and to enter a bid for these sectors. So concluding remarks, as we could see in this presentation, Brazil is a huge market, a huge tender market with billions to be spent by the public administrations. There is a federal regulations, but there's also specific norms for certain sectors, so you have to be aware of this. It is an open market, yet you do have a Brazilian preference, so you have to consider that when you plan your strategy. But don't be scared about it. There's a lot of tenders being won by joint ventures with foreign companies or by foreign companies being legally representing here in Brazil. And foreign companies, obviously, as I said, they must be established or represented. Sometimes the best way, the best option will depend on the sector. Obviously, for infrastructure, the joint venture is the trend for the foreign companies. For smaller tenders, sometimes local representation is enough. Obviously, Brazil, as everyone knows, is a very bureaucratic country, and it could be a long process to be part. So what we recommend is to plan ahead and be prepared. So keep calm and bid. You will win it. Thank you. Do you want to say? So this was my presentation. I thank you. I can't hear you. Your applause, but thank you very much for your attention. And now I'll come to present a bit more about our company. So LIRNEO is actually an international relation, business and event office. We're based in Recife, where the UKTI is also based here. And our aim is to bridge the gap between Brazil and global markets. We offer several services, but the main one is business support. Business support being helping foreign companies to come into the Brazilian market, or vice versa, Brazilian market to go abroad. This includes investments, looking for investors or investment, and also helping for tenders. We also act in global events, PR, and we do have a service of visa and relocation. So we offer this service to companies coming to Brazil and vice versa. Our team is multicultural. I'm half French, half British. My business partner is Brazilian, but lived for 10 years in the UK. All our staff is highly qualified and has an experience abroad. We speak in English in the company and not Brazilians. We speak five languages, so we can work and operate in those languages, being English, Portuguese, French, Spanish, and Italians. And in terms of our network, we based in Recife at our headquarters, but we do have associates in Rio and São Paulo whenever we need, we have a national project. And we also work with partners in the US, Europe, and Asia, which I think some of you are listening today. So this is, to sum up, this is what we can offer. If you're interested in bidding in Brazil, LIRNEO offers tailor-made solutions with your professional, high-level, multilingual assistance for your business. So here are my contacts, whether by email, my mobile phone here in the middle, or my Skype. I'll be, if you are interested, if you want more information about tenders in Brazil, or if you're interested in entering the Brazilian market, please do contact me or our team, and it'll be a pleasure to serve you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lucas. So this presentation was from LIRNEO and the UKTI in Recife. Here on the screen you can see the services that the UKTI offer to British companies. If you are interested in knowing in practical terms what's on offer currently in Brazil for your company, what I suggest you do is to Google UKTI business opportunities, and you'll find a site which is frequently updated with new opportunities that we've sourced for British companies to be involved in. I hope that the presentation was useful for you. Even if it wasn't all good news, I hope that the news was at least useful.
We will make it good news.
Yeah, we can make it good news. Here are our contact details here in the UKTI. You can get in touch with us for more information. Obviously, we're here to support British companies in any way we can. Most of our services for British companies are completely free, so do feel free to get involved. We're now going to look through the questions that have been asked and try to answer the most appropriate. Give us, please, just 2 minutes to look through the questions and we'll get back to you.
Okay. So we have one question here is, how do you recommend a UK subcontractor bid? So I think this comes to what I said earlier. There's different ways to do it, either by representation, so you get a local company to represent you in Brazil, could be even a lawyer, or a joint venture, as I said earlier, which is you have to create the joint venture in Brazil, which will be led by the Brazilian company, and then you have to fulfill all the requirements. I hope this answers the questions. Another question is, how would we participate in the Petrobras project as a UK company? Obviously, Petrobras, as you all know, is quite an interesting topic at the moment with the scandal being part. But without any judgment, Petrobras is a public company. So it goes into it has to go through the same process in terms of bidding, in terms of tender. I think Graham here has some, want to complement the answer.
One thing I'll add is that Petrobras tenders often have quite strict local content laws. So a certain percentage of the product or service supplied to Petrobras must be Brazilian. Therefore, it's difficult sometimes for a foreign company to supply directly to Petrobras. So what we sometimes suggest to our clients here at UKTI is that they work with a company similar to theirs, established here in Brazil, and supply to that company, who will then supply to Petrobras. It's almost a shortcut to Petrobras, cutting through the bureaucracy sometimes.
And to complement even a bit more, it is interesting that for a foreign company to consider actually maybe not producing the goods here in the country, but at least assemble the goods wherever possible, as the public administration will be more likely to get your product, but also your suppliers locally. We do have the case of a client who had to move his production here in Brazil and go through a joint venture in Brazil, because his client, which is actually a private client, but will get tax incentive. So it's also, don't be scared of opening something in Brazil just to go for bids. It's also interesting for you to get some tax incentive for your business.
We have one more question. Actually have several which are asking for specific data. One example would be how much of total procurement in the energy sector is awarded to non-Brazilian companies. We don't have this information here, so what we'll do is we'll look it up and send the source of information to the person who asked the question. So if you did ask a question about data, please bear with us and we'll try and answer by email as soon as we can.
There's another question here. Is there any kind of special taxation for adding value by assembling in Brazil? Indeed, as I just said, there is some tax incentive whenever you produce a good or you assemble a good here in Brazil. This could be either at federal level or at the state levels. And sometimes municipalities also give these kind of incentives.
Okay, we're going to have to stop now due to time constraints. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
If you have any questions for either of us, you have our contact details on the screen. I can also give you Lucas's contacts if you need them. So please feel free to get in touch. And of course, this webinar will be on YouTube if you do want to share it with anybody else. Thanks very much.